Well, hello again. Welcome back, everyone. I am thrilled to be introducing my next speaker to you. This is Stacia Keogh. Stacia started by writing and producing corporate training videos as entertaining as they were informative. She is an actor and performance storyteller appearing on world stages, public venues, and screens everywhere. As a resting actor in London, Stacia learned the dark arts of advertising and how to use her story and acting skills to enliven pitches and presentations, most notably for J. Walter Thompson, The Really Useful Group, Imagination, Abbott Mead Vickers, and as an education officer at Kew Gardens. Stacia prepared thousands of young people for the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts exams across various disciplines, and she was a member of the Lambda examining panel for 7 years. She is now a somatic speaking coach working with senior managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs to present to teams, speak on panels, podcasts, and deliver keynote talks. She has created a podcast called Finding My Voice, on which she features people who have found their voice and use their platform to amplify others. She has spoken on numerous other podcasts, including Focus on Why, Women of Action, the Entrepreneur podcast, Lovelda Women of Power, Sister Snog, City Women Network, and several others. And if you play video games or listen to audiobooks, chances are you've heard her voice guiding you through your adventures. Stacia, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Kip. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm
and
just delighted. I'm just delighted.
share the secrets of story, because it's such a buzzword. Everyone's like, it has to have their story, and having your business story, it's the key to everything. And we've seen it play out so much on the global stage about who's controlling the narrative, and how that has a lot to do with how people think, how people act, and what they do next.
Exactly. Well, and you're right. I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about story and the power of story and using story. So I'd love to start off asking about that and keeping in mind the audience we have here with us today, which will be primarily women coaches and leaders, entrepreneurs. So what can you tell them about how to find their story and what's the value of that for them?
Right. So the thing is that your story is your personal connection to people, and the mind loves a pattern, and that's what a story offers. So it just gives that information that you have, all your data and all your facts and all your all the things that you want to communicate to somebody, and it gives them a relatable pattern to slip it into. And the most basic story that the spine of every story, I would like to say, is metaphor, because it's actually one point of reference, and then people understand what that is, and then it leads them into the other thing that they aren't familiar with or don't understand yet. And I think the thing with story, that everybody blabs about story all the time, but no one is actually really clear about what a story actually is. So
Agreed.
they talk about narrative all the time, or I'm going to take you on a journey and all of that. But all stories are narratives, but not all narratives are stories. And to me, a journey is when, like, you get on a bus at point A and then you get off at point B. It's not, the story is actually what happens on the bus. You know,
Right.
it's actually, and in order to be a story, you have to have three things. You have to have a character that we can identify with, and then you have to have emotion. It has to mean something. There has to be something at stake there that makes us care. And again, empathy, it's not having the same experience, but it's having the understanding of that same feeling. So we've all been through grief and loss, and we've all done something for the first time, and we've all met challenges and things like that. So we understand that. But your story around that, your experience of that might be different than ours, but that shared experience is what will connect us. And a story needs to have a transformation. something needs to be different, because otherwise what would be the point? So there needs to be a difference between the beginning and the end, and that difference is usually achieved by either achieving that object of desire, or life is different on the other end. So your story starts, you were asking about where to find your stories. Your story actually starts when your life blows up in some way or another. Something has happened, so you can't carry on the same way as you always have done, whether that's because a life event has occurred. Maybe you've gone into a different job, or you've gotten married, or you've gotten divorced, or your children have grown up and now you're an empty nester. So these are life events. Maybe it's because of something that's more of a pivot, like something has happened completely unexpected, and you just can't carry on the same way. Like, people get a diagnosis, people have a loss of some sort. We all know what force majeure means in our contracts now that we've had the pandemic. So that's a clear example of life has changed. And so that's kind of a pivot. There's also shifting and shedding moments, which are when we kind of let go of the way we used to be and we step into a new version of ourselves. So we've come, to a better, more fuller understanding, life experience. We've matured and we're different. So we're not doing things the same way we did. So our stories can be all about those things as well. So in those threshold moments, those moments of change, those moments where you meet a crossroads. In video games, we call them branching narratives. There's no good or bad in a story. There's only this or that. And they can be negative or positive. So don't be negaphobic, because if you don't have the negative bits in your story, then there's no tension to hold it together.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. So am I right then, if I've understood you correctly, the three things that the story needs the principal character. That if I'm creating a story, that would be me. So it would be the coach herself. It needs an organizing metaphor. So I'd love for you to share an example of that. And then it needs to show some kind of transformation. So the idea then of having a story, the big picture idea is, it sounds like aspirational. So you present your story, what you've been through, how you overcome it, to say, look, I've been through this, I've made it to the other side, and you can too. Is that sort of
that certainly is one structure, because stories have different structures as well. The one that's really popular there's a there's a very popular book called Story Brand, which is written by, I think his name is Daniel Miller or something like that. He's an ex-ad guy as well. And everything is about the hero journey. But that's not the only story going. And I think that's a very tired story. I think, though, that we have other stories that we can tell, and certainly other structures. And for women especially, our story doesn't look anything like that, because our story is much more subterranean. We have to, the heroine story is where you cut the ties with the feminine and you embrace the masculine. And then you go on this kind of subterranean journey, lose yourself, find yourself, and then you step into your own power, and then you bring back that wisdom and share it, which is different than the hero story, which is like hearing the call and going out and conquering, having spirit guides and all that stuff, which is what he does. And he positions the client as the hero, and you're there to save that client. You're their spirit guide, if you like, and you take them across this bridge of, where they have a problem to now they have a solution. So that's one way to do it as well. But there's two transformations in any story, and that's pretty much life or death. Either you become more fully alive or you become the living dead. So you can tell stories of warning, and you can tell stories of motivation. There's three things that you can use a story for. You can use it to bond your community together. So you can, use it to attract like-minded people. So you want to tell, stories about yourself and what you've been through, and people will go, yeah, I get that. I've been there too. Or they can go, I like how she, like you said, I like how she did that. I want to do like what she did. And she's done it, so she might be able to help me do it too. And there's also stories of warning. So if you carry on this way, this is what's going to happen,
Right.
but it could be better. So a really good story structure to do, I like to use Spark Lines story structure. And that is where you tell people, this is how it could be, but this is where we're at now. And then that gap is left open. And in that gap, you have the opportunity to fill your audience's mind with the learning, with all your nuggets of wisdom, because their mind is open going, so what happens? What do I do? So anytime in your story that you can create surprise or discovery or curiosity, then you open up that gap. And that's where the magic happens. That's what they do in advertising all the time. They create a deficit and you need to fill it with something, or they create, of the FOMO, they create fear and you have to come in, save yourself. So you're being manipulated all the time. So like really, this is why I got into this work, because I saw all that firsthand. And you hear it, in the news, like we mentioned earlier. And I'm really driven to helping people find their actual story. What actually is driving you? Because your story never shuts up. It's like there you are on a mission. You came here to do something. And there's a reason why you are driven to, like, keep finding more out, to keep working with something. And when you discover like what that is, what either makes you angry, what fires you up, what brings you immense joy and pleasure, what do you do that's like so easy you could do it forever, and you think, oh, everybody can do this. They can't. Spoiler alert. That you then discover, okay, that's really my story. That's what really I have to talk about, because people want to know what experience taught you. They
Mm.
want to know what you wish somebody would have told you, and they want to know, how did you keep going in the face of adversity? So it's all, I tend to work in threes. It's probably just my Celtic nature. That's the
It's a
magic
magic
number for
number.
me.
Yeah.
But so that's it. So you need those three things to have your story. You need that character, you need the emotion, and you need a specific event, a specific
Mm.
event. So because you want to get specific with that event, um, then it gives your story a real credibility, and your audience can really believe it and they can see it in their mind. So maybe you want to talk about a particular, like a birthday event, and you could talk about the first, the worst, or the best. Is a really clean and clear hack that you can use. Maybe this first worst or best job that you've had. Maybe it's the first worst or best relationship or something like that. So that's a way to kind of sift through your stuff and go, what was that? And
So
then get really specific about it, because then what you need to do is build out the context of that event, all the details, all the sensory details and the emotional details of it. And that's the tasty bit that your audience is going to, be attracted to. And then they can see it and they can feel it. And then show how, things went awry, the choices that you made, left and right, good and bad. It's not good and bad, positive and negative. And then, what's the new normal? What was the transformative moment for you? And then what now is the new normal? So when you build that context out, you really do yourself a favor, because then your audience can see clearly the contrast and the difference, that now that this is the new normal, and we go on from here. Because in those stories, when they say happily ever after, they don't mean that nothing else ever happened again. What they mean is that things aligned, and
mm.
what is above is now below. So it's like a conjunctive marriage of all the loose ends tied up together, and now we can go on from here to the next thing.
Oh, I love that description. So I've got a story that's swirling around in my head now based on what you've been talking about. And obviously the work you do with your clients is very bespoke. This is not a one size fits all process by any means. I would imagine you do very specific individualized work with your clients. I've heard that my background way back was in English literature, and I remember hearing that there are only really 7 stories, and all the stories that have been written in the world, there are only 7 of them. The hero's journey is one, rags to riches is another, unrequited love is a third. Is that your understanding? And are there certain story types, if there are just 7, are there certain story types that are better for this kind of storytelling? You know, you've talked about how the sort of maybe the hero's journey has become tired for people to hear. So what would you suggest is a maybe a fresher approach to storytelling?
Yeah, so I would say, I've heard those are the literature in certainly in Northern European literature. Those are the ones that get told and retold again and again and again. One of the things as a performance storyteller, that because I've worked with traditional tales and with different indigenous communities and people all from all different cultures with story, and is that everybody's got there's similar like motifs, which are
Mm.
those ones that you're describing, but the variants, that's where the richness lies, because you have to consider a lot of times we get our stories not necessarily from word of mouth, but there's these collisions of when stories were passed, like from one culture to another or from one person to another, and then editors got in the way too, and then this is where they controlling the narrative. There was, certainly with the Brothers Grimm, for instance, they collected those stories all over the place, and then they Christianized them and
Mm.
codified them to always, be about right and wrong, and the just desserts, and you see that with a lot
Very
of these,
moralistic.
very moralistic. And I find that that is really the death of a story, because you're not there. The thing about a story is, in any presentation, is you're speaking to somebody about something, and something that that your experience, and that's why, I mean, I have a methodology that can work for people, but it's always going to be individual, because I'm looking to find your voice and bring out the creative voice that you have, your authentic voice, which is formed from so many experiences that imprinted solely on you,
Mm.
and voices that that have formed your own natural voice. There's always going to be someone that you recognize in your life that had the voice of authority, and there's always going to be someone in your life that you recognize as that voice of care and nurture, and somebody else that was like a complete bully and a villain. But all of them imprinted on you. So when you speak, so about finding your voice, you are going to speak either like that person, because it's imprinted, or you're going to
Yeah.
speak to them and how they are now, not how they were back then, how they are now. So, how would you speak to that voice of authority now that you're standing in your own power? It's much more of like a peer thing,
Yeah.
or that bully that you can see them now. They're not so big and strong now. So with the different structures, so I have people look at, what their message is, and matching that story to the message. So what would be kind of the most useful thing? And you ask about metaphors, and that really depends on your audience. What is it that they would get? What is it that they would understand? And how can I then codify what I'm trying to explain to them in those metaphors? So I'll give you an example, for instance. So like governments and businesses, so many of them use war metaphors, the war on drugs and the invisible enemy and all of that stuff. But I think, it's much more useful to use, there's so many. Why don't we use gardening metaphors, about, tilling the soil, planting the seeds
Mm.
of imagination, and then weeding the garden, and then how do you nurture, how do you prune, how do you harvest, the blossoming of things. So you can do that, or you can use any sort of sports metaphors. if that's what your people are. You can use any construction metaphors are really good. You've got scaffolding, you've got a clear foundation. You want to, build different. You want to construct things so that it lasts. Things like this. Any sort of construction metaphors, you can get a general sort of category, and then you can pull from that. And it can be things that are physical metaphors, it can be sound metaphors, you can have object metaphors, you can have language metaphors. We speak in metaphor all the time, hanging on the edge, you know or taking the plunge, or things like that, between a rock and a hard place. I mean, all of those are metaphors,
Yeah.
every single one of them. So metaphors are really useful, especially when you're telling a data story, because you want to make abstract things, concrete. So especially things like money. People talk, they're talking about millionaires and trillionaires and billionaires now. And how much money is that? You know, and you think about it. And so if you match it to time, so if you look at like how many, I think it's how many minutes. So if you have like 1,000,000 minutes, it's like, I think it's like 11 days or something like that. But if you had a billion minutes, that would be 35 years. If you had a trillion, that would be like 350,000 years. It's like, do you see how the disparity grows
Yeah.
like hugely? So
Yeah.
now you kind of understand, why it's dangerous for people to have that much money, because then they're running everything and not telling us. So when we break it down, when I break things down into, kind of like what happened, how did it feel, what was an overriding emotion, and then what was the outcome. So as a basic way to bone that story down, to get just to the basics. And then we might look at different structures depending on what you want your audience to do. Do you want to bond them together? Do you want to persuade them to do something differently? Or do you want them to envision something that hasn't even happened yet? And then we
Yeah.
can use something like that structure, the sparkline structure, about planting the seeds of aspiration, and then but then saying this is where we are, and then but these are the steps that we need to get there. And then you've got engagement with your audience, because then they can go, oh yeah, I could be a part of that, or I can see myself doing this, or I can do that. You can always drop people right in the center of something. It's called in media res, so that they're like, whoa, you know now what, and it's really exciting and engaging, but then you have to fill in the blank and you have to pay that off.
Right.
Great example of that kind of storytelling is, I don't know if you know the story Breaking Bad. It was a great long form TV thing. It was on Netflix, and
Yeah.
every episode used to open up with like some incredible like thing. So if you drop people, this way you cut the faff and the fluff and the fat, and you just get right to the point, and you just say this thing. It's a bit shocking.
Mhm. Yeah.
But then you have to like fill in the backstory. This is how we got here. And then you have to say, and here's where this is going. But
Yeah.
it gets people right away. And then they have to know. And that's what'll have them sticking with you, because they still need to know. Another one, which is a brilliant one to use, is the false beginning. So you can, la di la di la, I know I'm here to talk about, thus and such. J.K. Rowling used this to perfection in her Harvard commencement speech. You're all here, you're graduating from Harvard, you're going to go on and accomplish amazing things. I sat where you did, but within 7 years of sitting where you are now, I was a complete failure at absolutely everything I ever did. So I'm going to talk about the gifts of failure. Nobody's expecting that. They're start talking about success, and then you just flip the narrative here, and it's like, whoa, again, creates surprise, and it engages, because you've opened up a gap, and they're going, whoa, what do we do now?
It's fascinating, and I'm thinking as I'm listening to you talking that I'm sure part of your work is to match up the kind of storytelling with a personality, because that sort of interrupting pattern structure that you just described, the J.K. Rowling, is not going to be for everyone, but for the right person, it's going to be really, really impactful. I love that. So I'm going to just sort of bridge this conversation and take a look now at the stage or platform a person might use to tell the story. So, what could you say to our audience about finding the right stage for that storytelling?
Yeah, so you're going to be telling your story all the time. And that's the thing. The most important, well, one of the most common stories that we tell is a story of ourselves. And that's in our pitch, in a social pitch. When you go networking, people are going to be asking you left, right, and center. So what do you do? And who are you? And everybody kind of goes, oh. And then they go rattling on about their features and benefits and all their accomplishments, like their CV. Especially women do this because they feel like they have to justify and qualify everything they say. We don't, and actually, what people want to know is, the qualities and skills that you bring. So this is the most basic story that I teach, is the story of you, which is your business bio, and what you say to people when you go networking. So you really just need to, first of all, say your name like it's the coolest thing you ever said, and then you want to give people an idea of the category that you fit into, and then what it is that's kind of unique about you, and think unique in terms of qualities and skills that you have that are unique. Anybody can be an accountant, but people that are that really work specifically with creative people, and look to how we can scale your business or how we can streamline things, that's going to be different than other accountants that just put numbers in boxes. You also want to, the other platforms that you can get are, if you are in networking groups and you have joined that group, a lot of times they offer you opportunities to spotlight your business. And that's where you get to do a micro presentation that's like 5 minutes or 10 minutes long. And that people make a mistake of thinking they've got to, again, shove everything into one little big. But you would, if you were to go away, a metaphor for you, if you were to go away on a weekend, you wouldn't try to shove a week's worth of clothes into like a backpack. You wouldn't. You would just select what you needed for that day. So this is another case of like cutting the fat, the fat, the fluff, and the fat. The fat, the fluff, and the faff. So faffing around is when people stand up and they go, "Oh, thank you very much for having me. I really, really appreciate this," and blah blah blah. I'd like to, just get to the point. And the faff is when you pad it out. Don't just. And the fat is when you have so much that you have to share. Like if you ever go to an Indian restaurant, you know how everybody gets different stuff? It's because you would never eat a full dish of that. It would just be too much. You have to taste everything. So just, come up with like one key thing that people need to know that you want to get there. And then, open with something that's like, a story that's utopian or dystopian, or maybe it's something that just happened to you that hooks people in. And then, why is that important to this thing that I'm telling? It's because there's a metaphorical connection there.
Yeah.
And then close it down by giving people something to do. Call to action. Always have one, even if it's just, take my business card, or I want you to go out and, see things differently, or do a different kind of behavior, or, right now, today, I want you to go out and find one thing that you can do differently, just 1%, just do like get up 1 minute earlier every day for the next 30 days. Oh, suddenly by the end of the month, you're a half an hour gained on your day. Things like that are, fun little things that people can go to. So getting those spotlight opportunities are great. The other things are doing this: podcasts, summits, getting on other people's platforms that you can be featured on, and panel discussions are great. So you can be seen with a lineup of experts. So look for people that are doing what you want to be involved in doing, people that align with you, because the thing about selling is it's not about, always closing the deal. It's really the ABC of selling is attunement, buoyancy, and contrast, which is also what's going to make your story sing. So you just find how you match the tone in that room. And so look for rooms that match your tone, where the people that you like to be around, that inspire you, live. That's how you know you're in the right room. You can look for uh, people are always looking for good speakers on subjects all the time. People that are doing events where they're doing promotions and things, anything in your area where you can just get some time in front of people practicing. And then the best thing, business expos are another place to do that.
Yeah.
um, the idea is that you get somebody to go along and take some really good pictures of you speaking, and get and maybe video it, and then you can chunk that down, and then you can have examples of you speaking. Anytime that you would present to a company,
Yeah.
to their people, at AGMs or whatever, they're always looking for somebody to teach a skill.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so you're actually building out your assets by doing that, having recordings, having photos, then you can repurpose them for different things. That's really great advice. And I'm thinking, you obviously love to have an audience. I love to have an audience. We're comfortable in front of a camera, in front of a group. That's not the case for everybody. So what would you say? I want to ask a question about, people that haven't done a lot of public speaking. And for most people, the fear of public speaking ranks above the fear of dying.
that's
So
a
it's a
that's a
real phobia
myth.
for people. So
Yeah,
I want to
no.
ask about that, about, someone who's not used to it, where could they start? And then I want to ask you about someone who's already been doing a lot of public speaking and what can they do now to take to the next level? So those two kind of groups of people among us, what advice could you give them?
Yeah, so if you've not done it before, and people do get really nervous about it, the thing is that you want to start one to one, sharing that story of you, or talking about a particular strand of your expertise, and just do that one to one in these networking things or on your discovery calls. Yeah. You can also do that stuff. I mean, they've made it, technology actually has made it really, really easy to do a live reel on either Instagram or LinkedIn. You can also, on Instagram, you can share the platform with somebody else. So it's just like you and them talking to each other like we are now. So it's a conversation. It's not
Yeah.
that scary. There's not millions of people looking at you. It's everybody looking at you in live situations is what happens, and there's a lot of energy that's coming at you. So if you're not a person that can go, yes, energy makes me feel like great, and some people get like completely bowled over by that and don't know how to reciprocate that action, and everybody's looking at you, which can be a bit, if people are uncomfortable being looked at, that everybody is. So I always think introverts are the loudest thinkers, and they have the most observational things to say because they're very good at observing.
Yes.
So I don't think you need to be an extrovert. You just need to tune in to people. Always speak to one person, because
Mm.
speaking to one person then means you speak to everybody because they think you're speaking to them. Um, and you will just build out that circle if you're not used to speaking. So then you start speaking to two people at a time, and then maybe three people at a time. And then if you're going to be in a spotlight situation, I mean, that isn't a cast of thousands. Those smaller networking meetings, there's like, maybe there's 20 people there or 30. um, Speak to one person in the front row, and then to another person, and then to another person, and then you just widen out your sphere of observation, really.
Mm.
And that's what you do. And whenever you're nervous, you bring it right back to here again. You check your notes. Yeah. Just a little bit. And with your hands, use directional hands. It's me, it's you, it's them, it's this. that sort of thing. If you're a speaker that you have, you've been speaking for a while, you don't mind speaking, I'm going to ask you what I ask my clients. How does it land? What kind of responses are you getting from that? Are you getting the response that you want? Most people that come to me for as speaking embodied speaking coaching, which is using a lot of somatic practices to get you out of your head and into your body so that you're centered and grounded, and then it comes from a place of like, wow, because that's what I do with this is I empower people to really share their story with all the imagination that's going and make those connections. That's really it. It's about empowerment, connection, and imagination. So they'll be coming to me because they are experts in their field. They're really smart, but they're actually turning down opportunities to speak. They're being asked to speak and turning it down because even though you may be an expert at whatever you do, you don't sound like the expert that you are. So you might have tons of information to share, but then when maybe you've been on like a TV like Good Morning Show or something like that, some of my clients have been, or they've been at a summit or they've been on a panel, and then they get the video back because sometimes your event organizer will say, oh, don't worry, we're taking pictures, we'll give you that, which is great. So if you get asked to speak, ask them if they're doing that. And then you can get some good assets from that and evidence, and they'll get it back and they're like, oh, that doesn't that interviewer is actually running the talk. I'm not running it. I'm not owning that. And so you want it to land and you want to be in control of it. So a lot of that is learning literally just technique, delivery technique, because there's like 3 pillars to public speaking. It's content, structure, and delivery. So you can have a ton of content, but if you don't have it structured in a way that then leads people through and makes those connections for people,
Yeah.
then it gets lost. And story is a big part of that because then they have some story that continues to develop and that is memorable. That pattern in the brain collects it and then it remembers it and it can extend it all on its own. But the delivery technique, and that's, pausing. And in that pause, you need to fill it with something. It's not just stopping for the sake of, I'm going to tell you this thing. So you kind of have to know what you're stopping for and how you're using that pause. But it's remaining in control. It's being able to use your voice with 3 different kinds of projection, whether it's audibility, intelligibility, or mental projection. It's being able to really capture their imagination. So that some of those, it's going to be like having the structure. So you've got those jaw drop moments and you've really made your point really clear. All of that stuff can come together and synthesize. A lot of my clients, it's really funny, but they'll say, oh, I got a standing ovation. And you're like, did you? And they're like, yeah, people clapped twice. And another person said, and it's like, why is that? And it's because you really landed it. You really gave the vocal clues so that people knew what to do and where to take their breath and where to clap and where to laugh. And you gave them time to do that. Remember, again, it's speaking. It's not reporting or lecturing. And it's really about giving people time to decipher it, because think about it technically. When you speak to someone, first of all, they have to get used to your accent and the frequency of your voice. Light travels faster than sound, so they're looking for these visual clues as to what the temperature and tone of that is that you're saying. And also they have to decipher what it is you said. And maybe your audience, first of all, even if they're English speakers, everybody has an accent. Second of all, they might not be a native English speaker, so they have to do some translating. So, give them a break, because we don't have the ability to like roll it back and watch it again or watch a text roll. So, you have to kind of give your audience, give them that break. You're the leader of the band is how you own the room. You are in the lead. People are looking to you for clues. So you conduct. When you breathe, they breathe. Where you look, they look. I learned that when I was doing a storytelling thing once, and I was really engrossed in it. My audience was really engrossed, and then somebody was doing something just outside the window, and I looked just to see, and my whole audience looked as well. It was like, no, 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 not them, me.
That this has just been such a fascinating conversation. You provided so many great tips and tricks for people, because for sure, public speaking is a prickly subject for a lot of people. So I know you've given really great value on this. I mean, it's gone by quickly. I can't believe how quickly it's gone by. So I just want to invite you now to share your free gift with everyone.
Yeah, so what I've done is I've collected all of this stuff together in like a little ebook, which is basically 1, 2, 3, story structure, which is again, how to find that content, structure it, and then some delivery tips in that. It's got some lovely little templates in it so that you can get your pitch together, that you can kind of locate those stories and play around with matching with your message.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so it's got all the stuff that I've been talking about it in there. So you can go ahead and have a bash with it. And if you have any questions or you maybe want to step into my world, I do a spotlight program, which is all about helping people that just want to, take that step into speaking, with panel speaking, with interviewing, with doing all this stuff with a group in the room. That's coming up in October. And then then I work one-to-one with people and with teams and businesses on their communication and presentation skills. So you can give me a free call for 30 minutes. We'll have a chat, and I'd love to hear your story.
Fabulous. Stacia, thank you so much for this today. It's been invaluable. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with your wisdom. So thank you.
Been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to be able to share, because that's my mission. I want people to share their lived experience because we need all the wisdom we can get.
Beautiful. Thank you.